Doing it live. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hunt Lift Eat podcast, brought to you by Health Eat Official on Instagram. The boys are back in more ways than one for this episode. I've been looking forward to this one for a couple of days. Cole Reed stepping out from behind the computer as podcast manager, co-hosting with me tonight. What's up, dude?
I know, which is wild because I feel like I've been on more podcasts, and by the time this episode comes out, a previous episode of ours will be out already. But like, I don't know, 5 or 6 podcasts this year. That's got to be a new record for me. I'm usually just in the background, sending T-shirts and using AI to fix all my mess ups when I'm trying to fix all the audio. So it feels good, and with Carey going through his move to Texas, which he proclaimed he was a Texan today, which I don't know if I should be proud or I should message him, be like, you don't have a driver's license. All you have is a mailing address. Like, get out of here. You're not a Texan yet. I just like messing with him. But yeah, gives me the opportunity to step out from behind the curtain and show my face a little more.
Heck yeah. And coming back, what did we decide? Austin Stone is back once again. Tactical approach outdoors. Austin, it's been a while. We decided 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah, it's been every bit that. It's kind of crazy how time flies, but it's been a while since I've been on with you guys.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, social media has like such a weird, like, I don't know. I feel like I've just been following along with everything that you've got going on, and like we've been keeping up and talking here and there, and it's like, oh, we're just buddies who've never met, kind of thing. And then it's like 2 years, dude. That's crazy. That's a long time.
I know. I was thinking about that when you reached out and asked to be on this podcast. I got to thinking, like, man, it's actually been quite a while since we've been in contact for a long time. So,
yeah, dude, no kidding.
It's awesome.
Yeah, pretty fortuitous, man. I'd like to hear kind of a recap of everything you've had going on with Tactical Approach. You've seemed to be moving and shaking, and the wheels seem to be turning, man. I know you've put a lot of hard work into starting this brand for yourself, starting this company and these services that you do. And longtime listeners will remember that Austin was previously a personal fitness instructor. You were a coach, right?
Yes, I was. Yeah, that was that was the full-time gig while I was building this brand and building this business. And it got to the point finally where I'm full time here. Yeah. So it's pretty cool how what has happened, especially the last 1.5 years, but especially this last year. Yeah. It's that a lot of growth, especially with the habitat management side of things. Been planting nonstop. I personally planted over 180 acres from March through June. Wow. And it was nonstop. And I don't think I've shut that tractor off very often in the last year. But all great things. And I recently added a new outfitting lease to the business, which is brand new to the brand. And, something that I've done for a while at Whitetail Workshops, doing the deer hunter education side of things. And like you said, for folks that have listened before, you knew I was really into adult onset deer hunting and, the deer hunter education. So adding this lease was a big one for actual in-person workshops, which I'm really excited to offer during the off season. It'll be weekend long workshops. You have the ability to come as many days as you want, stay overnight if you want, and just make for a really cool community building educational kind of process. And I'm also, offering Kansas whitetail hunts and pheasant hunts, also controlled shooting area there as well. So that was a big addition to the company this year, on top of just overall the services just kind of exploding and helping my clients with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And are you finding with your clients it's more just like adults who are wanting to get into it, or is it adults with like kids, like parents and kids kind of like going out and doing stuff like hunting?
Mm-hmm. Most of my clients are adults. That's my primary clientele, whether it be landowners who maybe they're bird hunters, but they're getting into deer hunting, or they're folks that have just really busy with their corporate jobs or whatever that they do, and they want to see more success. Getting close to that retirement. Either retiring this year or they're going to retire in a couple years, and they just want to set themselves up and set the property up for kind of an extended enjoyment. And also getting to know and understand deer hunting on another level, outside of just picking a stand and going to it for that day. There's a lot more to it. And if you approach it with a better approach, it'll actually pay off in a very big way. So I would say mostly my clients are adults. And I did have a fella reach out that's interested in bringing him and three of his sons out for a deer hunt this fall, and all of them are wanting to shoot their first deer. So that's could be a really exciting hunt to have
Yeah.
all of them in camp and try to get them their first deer.
Absolutely. How did the outfitting side of things fall in your lap?
I a buddy of mine owned this business for a couple years, and I guided on it. I guided on this particular property last year, and I helped him a little bit the year before. So I was kind of dabbling in a little bit of guiding here and there. Through the habitat work, I helped multiple other outfitters. I've been to Kentucky and helped outfitter out there, and I've helped multiple outfitting businesses through the habitat work side of things, right? And it kind of got to the point where my buddy wanted out of it. He didn't want to continue outfitting anymore, and outfitting was never something that I really wanted to pursue per se, right? But it was something that down the road, long game, that I might be interested in offering some low number, high quality hunts, and being able to figure out a way to add the deer hunter education aspect of it. And it just kind of came to the point where I've had a really good relationship with the landowners. My buddy wanted out of it. I liked the property. It just kind of worked out, Yeah. So it's kind of, I wasn't expecting anything like this to happen maybe for 5 years down the road, and the opportunity presented itself and I jumped on it.
What a blessing,
That's
man.
so cool.
You've been hustling. That's awesome.
Hustling, man, nonstop. It's been an awesome year.
That's way cool. Yeah, so I know a lot of draw systems for a lot of different states, but Kansas isn't one for me. Could you walk me and maybe listeners through what it takes to get a license in Kansas? Because I believe it's a draw system, right? Or how it works with the outfitter.
Yeah, so it's a draw system. Okay, am I back? As an outfitter, I don't get special tags you have to draw your tag personally and then pursue an outfitter if that was something that you wanted to do. So I know some states allocate X amount of tags to outfitters they can use for clients and whatnot. Kansas is not that way. So you actually enter the draw. You choose which season you want. Do you want an archery or do you want a firearms tag? And then most of the time, especially it's getting more difficult to draw. There's a lot more people interested in hunting Kansas, where Iowa, you're not going to draw a tag without 3 to 4 preference points. Kansas is getting to the point where you at least need 1 preference point.
Okay.
So I drew when I shot this fella a couple years back. I drew with 0 points. That was before I was a resident. I drew with 0 points. So you can still draw. Was it 0 points? You just pick your unit. If you're familiar with general draw states, you have to pick a unit, and then you pick an adjacent unit. That's how it works. So as a non-resident, when you draw the unit that you chose, and then the adjacent unit that you chose. So technically, you get 2 hunting units when you draw that tag.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So and as a landowner, Kansas does offer, if you own 80 acres minimum, you can buy a tag outright. where Iowa, you don't get that option. Where
Really?
you could be a landowner and still have to go through the draw process.
That's wild.
Yeah. So Kansas, at least if you're a non-resident landowner, you can still get a tag as long as you've got 80 acres.
Yeah. Wow.
So
I know
yeah.
it's not the same caliber of deer at all, but Georgia, they're dealing out 12 tags per season, just like doling them out.
Over the counter too. Like you just go online and you just hit purchase and 10 does $2, and we're like, this is so stupid. It's insane. Like you could kill does all day.
Yeah. That's something interesting though with the southern states is, the buck quality might not 100% be there, obviously a lot like we have in Kansas, but you guys have so many stinking deer.
Yeah, the volume's crazy.
And the volume is truly crazy. So yeah, I can see why the bag limit would be so high.
And it's a huge problem. Like when I live in South Carolina, and when I'm driving over to Carter's, he's only 2.5 hours away. Like you can tell from September to February, like all of this roadside kill, and you can just imagine like how many accidents have there been. Like insurance companies, I'm sure they've got a play in this where they're telling the states like you need to get more people out there, like up your limit, see if people will kill 12 a year, 15 a year, like just see what they'll do. And yeah, it's a huge problem. And also like Carter was saying, like the caliber of deer is not the same. Y'all have got some big boys up there, and ours are just scrawny, fast little creatures who love to play Frogger on, some of our major highway systems.
Fair enough. and I wish more states also would go to a $1 state.
Yeah.
I think that is a key aspect right there. That the states that have gone to a $1 system, just the caliber of buck that they end up turning out, it makes a huge difference.
It makes sense because I'll shoot more years than not. I'll shoot a spike and then we'll hold out for a 8-pointer bigger or whatever. You know what I mean? I'll get my meat out of the way and have a ton of food. But if it was just $1, right, I would hold out the entire season or not fill that tag, because I usually don't fill that second buck tag unless it's the right, unless it's the right kind of deer or whatever.
Oh, completely. And that's something, from a management aspect, outside of, everything else, the number one way to create bigger deer is older deer. You just let them survive. You pass them and you let them get older. That is the number one way to, if you did nothing else, no other food, no other mineral, you did nothing else. All you did was manage the type of deer that you harvest and how many you harvest. It will make a difference. You let those deer get that older, mature age, and a lot happens.
And you can probably speak about this a little bit more, sound a little more educated than me on about does too, Austin. Part of me thinks guys need to be shooting more does, at least in Georgia, and that would help buck populations.
Yeah, because you also think about you're talking buck to doe ratio, but you're also talking about overall food availability.
Right.
So yes, the number one way to create larger deer is to allow them to get bigger, right? But also, if they had more food available, and they weren't having to work as hard maybe to find it because of overgrazing issues, and that they were able to just hang out in an area that would provide them with enough forage throughout the entire year where they didn't have to try to pursue it. It does that would make a difference also. So that's something, folks, I've worked with folks in Alabama also, and they have that overgrazing, overpopulation type issue where it's harder to get food plots established, and they just eat everything there is. You have to try to create a very large amount of food in a small area to sustain that size of a herd. So, if you were to really thin the deer herd, it would allow your deer to have a little bit more forage availability, and especially high quality forage available for them, and that would help also.
Yeah.
And in states like, excuse me, in states like Georgia and you just mentioned Alabama, how would you even approach an issue like that? I mean, you got to think about the millions of acres that are available for hunting. And when I think of going out of state to go hunting, I don't think Georgia, I don't think Alabama. I'm thinking, Colorado, Wyoming, Iowa, or South
Mhm.
Dakota, states like that. How, like, I don't know if you have thought about this or if you've worked with anybody, like the folks in Alabama, but how do you get more hunters to come in and really help with that doe population?
Um, I don't I don't know what kind of incentive you could play with that. So I'm gonna speak from my experience in Missouri because I come from Missouri originally, and our biggest issue with that is they actually lowered the amount of tags that we can have, especially on public land. It got to the point where we could no longer use a doe tag on public land. We could, if you shot a doe, you had to use your any deer tag, which is your buck tag.
Hmm.
So that killed our incentive to kill
Yeah.
any does out there. Because if you go out there opening morning and you shoot a doe like we used to, you'd shoot a doe, get it to camp, go back out and keep hunting. So that killed that incentive because if I shoot that doe on opening morning, I can't hunt the rest of the time, and I can't kill a buck at all.
Yeah.
So I know from a Missouri standpoint, my perspective, it's killed a lot of incentive to kill does by doing what they've done along those lines. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. What would the incentive be? Because, we've gotten obviously killing bucks is cooler. It's more widely accepted. Even for the kind of thing where you would rather shoot a young buck because it has horns, even though you're meat hunting versus shooting a doe.
Yeah.
I don't know what if it's a social thing or it's just what we think of, but it's cooler to shoot something that has a horn than
Way
not.
cool.
You see,
Way cool.
do
Yeah.
what?
It's way
Yeah,
cooler. Sure.
yeah, absolutely, it is
I've
100%.
I've got two
Yeah,
initial thoughts on that. Saying one, I'm pretty sure it's a Disney movie, but Bambi. That's every time I say I killed a deer, they're like, "Oh, you killed Bambi." I'm like, "Oh,
right.
okay." Like that's. I think that
I want
that
baby's
might.
dad.
Yeah,
The
I'm
best.
like, I want Bambi's dad. I didn't kill Bambi. I killed Bambi's
Yeah,
dad. Like that's
exactly.
what I'm going for. And then
200
two,
minutes.
like just thinking about you said the social aspect. Killing a buck is way cool. Like I'll post a buck on Instagram all day. I'm like, look at this thing. We worked hard
Hmm.
for it. I don't care if it's spike all the way up to, 8
Yeah.
point. Like I love killing the buck or that animal with horns.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think I've ever posted a picture with a doe. I've never been like, look at this doe I got. Those are the same,
Yeah.
bucks are always unique in their own way. Whether they're even on both sides, one's got a kicker, one doesn't, stuff like that. So I think that's also probably part of like that social aspect.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with the social media aspect that we have now, compared to what we used to, I do believe that does play a little bit of a role, maybe, into it as well. So, yeah, I mean, if you want some meat, it doesn't shoot yourself a doe. I mean,
Oh yeah.
that's some good meat too. So,
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Where we hunt up in the mountains, they have very select either sex days. Not a lot of doe
okay,
there. Whereas the county I
interesting.
live in, you can shoot them any day, all day, either sex. But
September
and
to
then
January.
I think our friend in New Jersey, Bobby, they have a earn a buck situation where you have to kill a doe first before you can shoot a buck.
I like that idea. I mean, I kind of have that that plan with a special tag hunt that I have out here in Kansas, where the property's a limited draw. They only allow X number of people in, and in order to get a preference point for the following year to potentially draw that tag again, you have to shoot a doe. So
that.
it's not really an earn a buck per se, but that's your way to get a preference point to increase your odds of drawing that tag again next year. So it's kind of an incentive because they do have a high deer population. They're trying to lower their overall numbers on that property. So that's kind of an incentive that they're using to encourage doe harvest on that property over just pursuit of a big buck.
Yeah, and we know a couple friends who on their own property, their private land, they do that as well. They're just like, you have to kill a doe first before you can even think about shooting a buck. And then even with that, Carter, I'm talking about Perry and Evan, just their strict rules, and they're like, you can only kill certain bucks. Which at first I was like, it's kind of stupid, but then we were sitting up there and you can just see how many different bucks there are. And like, we saw one come by and I'm like, I would shoot that all day. And Carter's like, that's not a shooter buck. I'm like, that thing is huge. But that's how you get like, those mature deer.
Yeah.
And you have to kill a doe before you even think about killing that buck. So it is definitely like earn a buck, but it helps with that land management piece that we were talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That buck was way cool, but he was a 2.5-year-old,
Yeah. I thought he was huge. I was like, oh my God, we have to shoot that thing. Carter's like, no.
That's what you want to get to, though. You want to get to that point where those 2-year-olds and those 3-year-olds look like monsters, right? But they're still young and they haven't. They're not even close to their full potential. So if you're rocking 130 to 140 inch rack at 2 to 3 years old, that deer's going to blow up in the next couple years. That's how you end up shooting the 170 plus on a consistent basis. Is you have a revolving door of giant 2-year-olds.
Yeah. Problem is, 2-year-olds don't last long when Cole and I are behind the trigger.
They don't last long, period, because they just aren't smart enough yet. That they haven't. That's a tough place. It's a tough age because they still haven't had enough seasons under their belt to really become weary enough. So getting a deer past 3 can be pretty tough, even with neighbors.
Oh yeah.
I was just thinking, like, if I'm not pulling the trigger, someone else is.
Right.
I'm just like, we're butt up against another property, and I know, they might have kids or grandkids, and they're just looking to go out there and shoot the first thing that walks by them. So I'm like, I might as well shoot it and take it home with me. Screw those people.
I love it. That's too good.
All right, Austin, let's jump into some management, man.
Let's do it.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of what falls under your umbrella when you talk about habitat management, your services that you offer to clients? And then I want to talk about some specific kinds.
Yeah. So I plant a lot of food plots, obviously, but there's a lot more to it than just food plots. I do a lot of TSI work, so timber stand improvement. Plant a lot of native grasses to increase overall bedding and transitional habitat diversity. Brush clearing, tree removal, just kind of the list goes on. Access trail creation, because access is probably one of the most important aspects of putting together a good plan on your property, but also making it hunt right. You know what I mean? And not messing up your hunt before you even get a chance, or not messing up tomorrow's hunt or next week's hunt because of this hunt. So, putting in those access trails and really anything my client needs. We've put in box blinds and tree stands, and I'll adjust trail cameras, whatever needs happen. I've got a client right now. He's got three mega giants on his property right now. He's a second year client, and he's just has some crazy deer on property, and he's super pumped, and he's like, we've got to figure out a way to get you one of these deer. So I'm helping with adjusting cameras and trying to figure out these early season patterns with him, and trying to get ways to brainstorm ways of how we can get in on these locations to get him
Yeah.
a good shot at one of these deer. So, the my bread and butter is the hunting aspect. I really like, and through the public land side of things, have developed my hunting process. And then the habitat side of things comes with it,
Yeah.
because I always feel hunting pressure is your number one, dictating factor with success of your property. And then, no matter how good of a habitat that you've developed, if you don't hunt it or use it in a correct manner, pressure wise, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot anyways.
Right.
So, yeah, basically anything and everything my client needs to implement, as along with an overall plan for that implementation.
Like a long-term plan.
Yes, very much so. This is what's happening with your deer movement right now. This is kind of where they're bedding. This is what the general food sources and habitat diversity looks like on your property. And then putting into a first year implementation plan. So access trails, this year food plots, if you even need food plots,
Yeah.
what to plant, when to plant it, you know, retaking an old hay field that they really don't care to cut hay in anymore. They'd rather have it as better bedding cover, or they would rather use it as food, or it's an old ag field where instead of a farmer coming in and planting the same thing on this giant 100-acre strip and then harvesting it, why don't we create this ecosystem in that 100 acres, splitting it up and diversifying it between native grasses and grain plantings and green food plots, creating this depth of habitat that, where instead of a deer walking out of that far tree line and looking through that entire 100-acre piece and seeing everything and then just keeping on moving, he gets that end, and he has this whole 100 acres of all this diverse habitat to traverse through, and in turn makes him want to stay on property longer and even choose to stay there full time. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And that's something that through the public land side of things, what I always looked for, right? So I always looked for properties that had a very high diversity of habitat, right? The higher the diversity, the more likely that buck is going to have a smaller home range. And in turn, that smaller home range makes him more predictable and more huntable all year, right?
Right.
Where you get more to where I do a lot of hunting in north central Kansas, and the habitat diversity is not there quite to the extent. So the deer have a larger home range, right?
Right.
They move more. And, now my job is how can I create a higher diversity in that area and encourage deer to stick around a little bit longer,
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely.
It's brilliant because I feel like a lot of maybe smaller guys with access to private, or guys that own smaller pieces of private, or just don't have the funds, right? You're looking at hunting through the lens of a couple months, right? Where you really need to be looking at it through the lens of what you're talking about, and you building
Yeah.
an ecosystem, and that's going to it boosts everything. It's right synergistically, it all comes up together, and then you have more opportunities because your deer are better fed, they feel safer, they're better protected, they don't have to search for what they need year round. And so thinking about the entire, not just, hey, where is this buck going to be in October?
Yeah.
Where is he going to be in March, right? Where is he going to be in April? What is he doing then, right? You want to keep him
Yeah.
around as much as possible.
And then it really just depends on your property, because some properties, obviously a 700-acre property here in eastern Kansas, I can do a whole lot with,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of space to create all year food and bedding, right? Where a 40-acre property in the Ozarks of Missouri, it's a little bit more limited, It's big timber, big ridge type areas, but how can we still replicate some of that in a manner, right, where we can still create enough diversity to at least get deer to spend more time on property during daylight? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if we don't have the space to create a year-round ecosystem, how can we still create a kind of diversity that will keep him around longer during daylight? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
And it's probably
that's really the end all goal, is how do we keep him on property longer during daylight?
right. And it's probably a little more complicated and nuanced than buying a couple bags of throw and grow at Tractor Supply and tossing it down in front of your stand, which I feel like
Just a hair.
I
Just
feel like
a
a lot
hair.
of people do that, and I'm like, oh, God.
And honestly, the food plots aren't necessarily where you want to hunt anyways. You know
Right.
what I mean? The last thing you want to do is make your deer herd food plot shy, because you're
Yeah.
hunting the food plots.
Yeah.
So the sooner during daylight that the young herd and the does are getting into that field, the sooner that buck is closer too. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if the does and the younger bucks feel confident enough to get out there and just chill, and they bed really close to that food, then you can hunt behind them in transition and catch that buck in transition early, right? So it's a balancing act. I mean, some of the best stands, even if you have a crazy food plot program, still are your transition stands, from that bed to that food source in the evening, or the backside of that bedding cover in the morning through midday.
It just makes me think, Cole, we just need to rethink how we're hunting these properties, because like some of the stands that we finally like got smart last year and put stands in a couple intelligent places that I haven't hunted on this property that I've been hunting for 10 years, right? And but like, there's a stand on the hayfield, right?
Mhm.
Which is fine, but like we've never killed the big giant one out of the hayfield, right?
Mhm.
And then there's a stand about 100 yards behind it, straight up the freaking mountain on a little plateau that we call High Meadow. And, if I'm taking guys hunting, two guys are going to be sitting in those stands, and one of them is going to get the short end of the stick based on the wind, regardless, right? It doesn't matter. But someone's getting screwed, but we're still putting guys in the stands anyways, right? Possibly ruining the hunt for the afternoon or for the next day, like whatever, right? It's just like, I don't know. There's some laziness sometimes that you need to take a step back and address, like access, right? Like,
Yeah. And it's thinking the long game too, with tree stand rotation, and the idea that you can't shoot a buck on the couch, right? Which is true, but you
but
can keep yourself from shooting that buck in 2 days if you don't sit on the couch.
right.
Right? If you go hunt now with poor conditions, you could actually keep yourself from killing that deer in a couple of days with correct conditions if you would
Yeah.
have just waited. Or if you had another stand that it's not your number one stand, but you still want to go hunt, right? It's go hunt, do your thing, right? I'm not going to tell anybody never to go hunt, but don't kill your better stands if the conditions aren't right, if your goal is to kill big mature deer.
Yep.
So your goal with these deer is to try to kill them on as few sits as possible, because
Right.
the more you're in there, the lower the odds are that you're going to kill that deer.
Yeah.
I'm smiling here because when you phrase it like that, I've always it just confirms, like, I've always had a short mindset, like just short-term goal, and that's always to just get a buck and get out of there. Like, it's just but now when you explain this, it's like, okay, you're not hunting for those 2 to 3 months or 3 to 4 months. You're trying to hunt year round, and I like that you can kill a buck from the couch. I kind of like that. When you look at it from, like, don't go out there if your conditions are not ideal, because it can ruin that hunt in 2 days, 2 weeks, whatever, when your conditions are ideal. And we have the technology now to say like, oh, it's bad conditions tonight, like pressure's not good, too much moonlight, whatever. And we can see like, oh, in 2 weeks, conditions are looking really good. And I think Carter brings up a good point too. Like, especially before, I was living in Washington, D.C., and I would come down during the rut for 4 or 5 days, and the whole idea was no matter the condition, just get out there, get in a stand and try to kill something. Whereas I think now, one, he and I live a little closer now, and two, I think we've gotten more mature as we've gotten older, not so trigger happy anymore, even though it's still a ton of fun. But we can shift our thinking into that year-round type of hunting.
Totally, and that's something that I've tried to take with my out-of-state hunting throughout the years is my timing. Yes, and I will say I have been very fortunate with the types of jobs that I've had throughout the years, that I've had the ability to kind of be more flexible with when I take off. You know what I mean? So where I don't have to put in my 5 days PTO 3 months in advance for a specific hunt, I can wait until that 15-day, 10-day, 15-day forecast gets put out, and I see the conditions that I need to come in, and then I'll start paying attention to that. I'll be patient with it, and I'll just kind of time it a little bit more around that time. Of course, it's never foolproof because I've showed up for hunts, and the front that was supposed to come in today doesn't show up for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
It's how it goes sometimes, but I at least tried to time it at least in a manner that I was there for that, for the proper conditions. So that's always something I've tried to take, is kind of hunt a non-resident hunt similar to a resident hunt, if that makes any sense. Yeah, well, not overly pressuring the hunt property in a way just because I was a non-resident.
Which is tough when you travel for a hunt.
That's tough. Very much so. Yeah.
All right. I have a practical application question for you, or scenario, I guess, that for sure doesn't apply to my new house that I moved.
And the new tree house.
That's right. So we had the farm, and it was awesome, and there were some studs on it, and we killed some good deer, and then we sold it, and we moved to this place, a couple acres on the lake, and we back up to Army Corps land. So there's a ton of public land, ton of deep woods along the lake that we back up to, and then I have some. They came in and select cut a lot of the trees. And I'm deciding what I'm going to, the huge deer population, there's deer everywhere all the time. And I'm trying to decide now. You mentioned part of what you do with some people is plant native grasses for bedding and cover and whatnot. And my solution they came in and forestry mulched everything back here, which was terrible. And it just allowed all the weed seed to come to the surface that had been suppressed, and they cut too many trees, I think. And they only left me with poplars and sweet gums and pines. They cut down all the hardwoods because they're idiots. And I'm just covered up with, are you familiar with Japanese stilt grass?
I'm not overly familiar with that one.
It's an invasive grass that nothing eats. It's just like beautiful and green year round because nothing touches it.
Okay.
And I need to kill
rescue out here.
Yeah. I need to kill all of it and put something useful down.
Yeah.
Because it's not doing me any favors, right? The deer don't like it. Like, nothing likes it. When you're talking about ecosystem, which is what you were talking about, like thinking about the big picture, it doesn't do anything. And so my thought was kill it and then put we probably have 1.5 acres, maybe 2 acres until the public land. Try and make a small kill plot, a shaded kill plot to shoot from my daughter's treehouse that I just built her. That was my idea. But now you kind of got my wheels turning about native grasses, and maybe I
Mhm.
should go the bedding route instead of the food route.
It depends on what's around you. It really depends on your neighbors because that's also part of developing a plan, like for a client property, is what is going on around you. You know what I mean? What will benefit your property the most, especially when you have limited space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what's surrounding you? What kind of food is it? All cover hardwood stuff, or do you have ag around you?
No ag anymore. Not really. um, they probably get their fill of pansies and hostas and, you know, uh, people's flower beds and whatnot for sure. And then lots of browse in the woods themselves. And they bed in my front yard too. They bed in my front yard.
Then you might be good with adding food. That may be a good option for you is to go the food route just because it's different.
Yeah.
Know what I mean? It's increasing the diversity, not only talking diversity on your property, but diversity on your surrounding
Yeah.
properties. You
Yeah.
know, so it may not that may be actually a good route to take too, is and maybe go the route of don't plant the entire thing in one green clover planting.
Right.
You know what I mean? Split it up a little bit, maybe kind of section it out to where you can encourage a buck to come in a little deeper. You know,
Yeah.
maybe you do a native grass planting, you know, to the back to give him a transition out of the hardwoods
Yeah.
into the plot. Um, Make sure it's plenty screened off from the house. You know,
Yeah.
that way you try to get deer into that before dark, because the last thing you want to do is, you know, that they're only getting there, you know,
Yeah.
after dark. So make sure it's all screened off from the house. So you could put it in annual screen from there, or you could start a switchgrass screening or something along those lines. Or even use bushes and trees. You know, whatever you've got available, whatever you want to do along those lines. It depends on how the layout of the property. You know, just make sure it's hidden and the deer
Yeah.
can feel safe in it. You know, and you could use a combination of a grain and a green to section out that food plot in a manner of speaking to add multiple different varieties and cover simultaneously. So you could so here we like using a lot of sorghum. That's a fantastic crop because one, most farmers do not plant sorghum. It's all corn and soybeans. So why not plant something different? You know,
Right.
so you
Right.
know, and deer love sorghum. You know, sorghum milo, and they bed in it and they'll eat it all year.
Yeah.
And by us planting it for our deer, we're not going to be harvesting it.
Right.
So while everybody else around us has harvested their beans and corn, and you've got a nice dirt field for mile,
Yeah.
our
You,
place has
yeah.
standing grain still
Right.
all year, all winter.
Right.
So you know that could be something to look into also, is maybe get something that's a little taller that you can use as a grain, you know, and bedding simultaneously. You
Yeah.
know, that's what would be great to use for that, especially for a small area like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the pieces to the puzzle, right? And
Yeah.
your puzzle includes your neighbor's properties, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. I might have to FaceTime you this week and show you.
This has
That
already
sounds
got my
good.
wheels. This has got my wheels turning. I'm
And
thinking about the different, because it's kind of weird. It's like there's different plateaus and just like
yeah,
what are we calling it? It's
Terrace because it's old farmland.
terraced. Yeah. So
yeah.
it's all terraced, and I'm thinking about like, okay, on the top terrace, should we plant something tall so that it creates that barrier between us walking out and further down. So and then it's oh man,
And
this is
also
cool.
not to interrupt you, but you've
Yeah.
still got public right there to hunt.
Yeah.
So you could hunt that buck in transition out of his
Yeah.
bed coming into your property. Even though you might not be hunting your property, you can hunt your property boundary on
Yeah.
the public side and get him in transition to your property. So
Right.
that's an option as well. So as
The
if you're offering them something to get them to your place
Hmm.
early enough in the day, you can sneak in from the back there and hunt kind of the bet boundary and try to maybe even catch him on the public side.
The dumb thing about Army Corps land on this lake, on Lake Lanier, it's the only lake in Georgia that you can't hunt Army Corps land for deer.
Oh, okay.
So dumb.
Which it's not a bad thing at the same
But
time.
another piece to the puzzle, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing at the same time. That could also encourage him to maybe stick around a little bit closer as long as you're not putting too much pressure on
Pressure.
your property.
Right. Yeah, I kind of view it as it's a
It's tough to
wildlife
do on 2 acres.
for sure.
Yeah.
Tough. Yeah, coming from what we came from. But yeah,
Yeah,
all right.
that's a good idea.
I got my notes here. You and I talked before about some topics to kind of cover. 'Tis the season, right? Here in the
It
South,
is.
a lot of people are going to be putting in food plots in September, and then hoping for some rain soon. The first thing you said to me was hunter access, man. How often do you see people screw that up?
That's the number one issue,
Yeah,
period, that I see. Other than that tree stand that's been there for 20 years, that's all they hunt, and the
yeah,
deer walk around it.
yeah,
I love finding that. It's so funny because I'll be walking a trail that is just beat, just hammered, and then it'll go dead. Right? It dispersed. The movement will disperse. I'm like, man, what in the world's going on? And I'll just kind of look around and I'll find a tree stand and I'll go on the other side of that tree stand, same distance, that trail pick up again.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah. And
they know, man. So hunter access is the number one issue I've seen. I'll get messages where, hey, these deer were daylight nonstop, and I started hunting it, and within a couple of days of hunting it, they're nocturnal, or
yeah,
they're gone, and then they return a week later, right? And that's 100% access.
yeah,
They have you nailed. They know that you're on property. They know that you're pressuring, and the moment they've got that figured out, and they have a reason to skirt you and stay on the neighbor's property, then they will. You
yeah,
know, so that's something. Even if they want to be on your property, but like I said, if you have everything there that is perfect, but the pressure's there, they still won't use it during daylight. So yeah, access is the number one I
yeah.
found.
And then that kind of transitions into the next thing you mentioned, which was regulating the pressure of the property.
Yeah,
Easy to screw up.
it is, especially because you want to use your property. Like we were just talking about, it's 2 acres, but you want to use your property.
Right, right.
And I don't. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't blame anybody, right? You want to ride your UTVs out there. You want to ride your ATV, and you want to go hiking, and you want to check your food plots and see how they're growing. You want to check your cameras, fill your mineral sites or your corn, and you want to do all this, but you forget that you start doing it too often,
Yeah,
and widespread on the property where, you know, like I said, if you've got a big property, it's easy to section that property out, right? Where, hey, this front portion here, this is where we're gonna keep most of our activity, right?
hmm,
This portion back here, the bucks tend to hang out more in bed, so we're gonna use it as a bit of a sanctuary, right? And everything else is kind of transition. So we're going to minimize our presence, but we're not going to completely stay out of it. You know what
yeah,
I mean? It really comes down to what your overall goals are on the property. If your number one goal is purely hunting, easy. We can easily build something for that. Not a bit. It's very simple, straightforward. But if your goal is still to use your property like normal people do, all of
yeah,
us want to use our property, for fun, not just deer hunting, then you have to just be smart about what you're doing and when you're doing it, set limits, and then also be, accept the fact that you might have a little bit of limitations on the hunting side of things just because this is what you want from your property also.
Right.
You're not
Right.
going to hold 160 plus deer on a 100-acre piece that you want to use on a regular basis.
Right.
It's just, it just won't, the deer won't put up with that.
Yeah.
So where if you had that 100-acre piece that all you wanted was habitat and hunting it, and you wanted to be ultra precise, oh yeah, that thing will be loaded.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's something I've actually had a lot of people I've kind of debunked for clients in the past. Is they'll talk about a property and they wonder why they're not seeing the big bucks on that property, or they're not seeing them during daylight especially. But this other property, that's where they kill the big ones on, right?
Yeah.
That's where they're always in the past intel and all through the years, that's where they've killed the big deer on. But they're convinced driving the property and going about the property just at will, the deer will get used to it, and it won't affect them.
Yeah.
But the property that they're actually kill the big deer on, they're never on.
Right. Just
And
to
the
hunt.
property that exactly, and the property that they're trying to convince you that the deer will get used to your driving, you're only seeing young bucks and does watching you on your tractor. Yeah, I've driven by a bunch of does and young bucks. Just watch me on the tractor, just hanging out in the food plot while I'm planting it. But I've never once had a big mature buck do that.
Right.
So, I mean, that's you got to take that into account, when you're developing an opinion like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you got to make a decision, right?
you do, and it's all about just figuring out your priorities on your property. That's really what it is. It's how big your property is, what's your habitat and terrain look like, and your ultimate goal for that property. And then knowing those three things, then you can figure out a plan of action. When it comes to the any kind of habitat improvement you want to make, that could help you use more of your property and still give the deer the safety that they're looking for, to stick around more. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. If I seem absent-minded, it's because I'm just thinking of everything we need to change, Cole, very quickly.
We had a plan. Now we don't have a plan.
It's out the window.
Yeah.
It's out. We've got to read.
Brings us to our next point, Austin. Tree stand rotation strategies.
Mm-hmm.
That time to rotate some of our stands, Cole.
Well, and what I mean by that isn't necessarily rotating them into different trees, unless that specific tree is actually causing you issues with getting busted, right? That tree is actually probably a good tree. What I mean by tree stand rotation is your hunting pressure in that tree stand. It's the sitting on the couch. It's the stay on the couch today method versus going and hunting that stand. You know what I mean? So, just because your tree stand's been there for 20 years doesn't make it a bad stand. There's a reason typically that stuff is there.
Yeah.
Because through observation, those tree stands have ended up there because you're like, deer are here all the time, right? What has created the problem with that tree stand is how often it's hunted, when it's hunted, and how it's accessed. That has what has created the issue with that particular stand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, hunting a north wind stand on a south wind makes no sense, right?
Right.
So it's that's what I mean by the tree stand rotation strategy. Even having multiple north wind locations where you go back to as few sits as possible, right? That's our goal, is to kill that buck with as few sits as possible. And I have had tree stands that hasn't happened very often, but there are certain stands that I have hunted every day for 5 days straight and killed that deer on the fifth day. Right.
Yeah.
The only way I can do that is if I have a foolproof access,
Right.
and the wind is immaculate. That's the only way. That's the only way I can get away with that. And typically that comes from a water access.
Okay.
That you know what I mean? Because I'm leaving very minimal, if any, ground scent where it matters. And that creek that's running behind me has such a dramatic thermal pull
Yeah.
that it's helping it's pulling my scent almost no matter what the wind is doing.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on what is happening in that particular location. But if you have a foolproof access, you can get away with hunting it more often without messing it up. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep. 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 Hmm. When you start feeling like you got it figured out, and then you talk to Austin, and you're like, "Oh boy."
You never got to figure it out. I'm gonna tell you right now. If you're sitting here talking to somebody that is like, I know they're all there is to know, you
Yeah.
probably ought to stop listening to that guy because he's full of it.
Yeah.
It's also got me thinking about access on some of our, or excuse me, on some of Carter's properties. We've been going in the same way, and I feel like we've definitely hit the same stands a little too often. And so now it's got me thinking about maybe getting a couple more stands and putting them in different locations based off of just wind patterns and travel, and maybe throwing a couple more cameras up just to see what that looks like. And like you said, it's not necessarily about moving the stand, but limiting the time in each stand. It's like, okay, yeah, you don't want to hunt a north facing when, wind's going south. That just don't make no sense. So that's definitely, I wrote down my notes, thinking about some of the stand transitions.
And that's what worked for us last year. Was I've been hunting this for 10 years, and then we put a stand where I'd never put one, and killed a great buck out of there. Right, just working the problem a different way.
That happens a lot. I'll actually go on an initial visit to a property for a consulting plan, a consulting client, and I love walking with the clients, and seeing what their perspective is on property. But obviously I've got to develop. I got to go in with as much of a blank slate as possible. Yeah. Yes, I want to know what you know, but at the same time, kind of the beauty of me being there is because I don't have that intel. I can go in with a completely new perspective and blank slate, and I'll go to a piece of the property that they either have never been to at all, or they haven't been there in years. And I'll go there and I'll find this rub on a tree, just this stinking big, or just a massive car hood size scrape. I'm like, why are you not hunting back here, man?
That perspective is important, man.
And that's something you have to be so careful with previous years intel also, is you can get yourself into a rut. It's that trail camera issue also, is you get to the point where you're chasing pictures, and you put the blinders on almost. You know what I mean? You start thinking in a tunnel vision, and you stop looking outside the box, thinking outside the box, and looking at the big picture and paying attention. And I like saying this, but listening to what the deer are telling you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they're going to tell you where they feel safe. You just got to listen to it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So and we can get trapped in that tunnel vision with trail cameras and 20 some odd years of experience on a property. I know I've found myself doing that on properties I've hunted for a long time, compared to properties that I just started hunting. I've almost had more luck on properties that I've only been on that year than properties that I've hunted for 20 years, just because I almost have a tunnel vision on that property, versus I go into this property thinking outside the box, whole new slate, just paying attention, and the moment I took that perspective into the property that I knew, that's when it changed.
Yeah.
That's when the success and the understanding really changed on those
Yeah.
properties.
And I think it's also a comfort thing. Like every year we have some level of success. It may not be great, but we usually come out with a deer. But it's just like it's routine. We've done this before. The stand's already there. We take the same approach. We don't think about what could we be doing better when it's like we're killing deer, but we could always be doing better, and we just never look at that next step. We get stuck in this just comfortable routine, and I think that's maybe going in with this new perspective of like, okay, this is what we usually do, but let's look around, let's be, Carmen Sandiego, let's investigate this stuff and try to, come up with a new approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. We're rolling up on an hour here, Austin, but there were several more things on the list, man. I would love to do maybe a mid-season recap, or when you're done outfitting, catch up with you, see how the hunts went, and see what the off season for Austin and tactical approach looks like, man.
Absolutely. No, that sounds fantastic. Anytime you guys want to jump on, I'm always game to chat.
For sure, man. Well, I think you've given us and listeners a lot to think about. Yeah. There's still time. There's still time out there to make some decision, make things happen.
Lots of time.
We've got food plots to plant and all sorts of stuff. We need to go. I'm going to go check stands this weekend on my properties and perhaps move some around. Start thinking about it from a different point of view, man. But Austin, where can people check out what you got going on, man?
You can find me on all socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Tactical Approach Outdoors. I've been pretty shy on posting videos the last year. I've just been too stinking busy, man.
You were busy on the track.
Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah. Building videos takes a long time. So I would have try to increase that YouTube presence a little bit more going through season, at least again. And my website, tacticalapproachoutdoors.com. If you have questions about anything, anything, obviously the services and whatnot that I offer. And if you're interested, if you drew a Kansas tag in Unit 8 and you're interested in coming out for a hunt, don't hesitate to get a hold of me. I'm keeping it limited for a reason, so that way we can just keep a great hunting experience. And also I don't have to give up my whole deer season.
There you go.
So, and then if you have questions about anything else, hunting strategy, habitat strategy, you just have a question about something, don't ever hesitate to shoot me a message.
When can I buy a preference point in Kansas?
You've got to get that in.
Is it open right now?
No, it's not. You've got a month to draw. I think April to May is your draw. And I actually don't know. I have to look it up. I don't know if you can actually buy a preference point individually in Kansas. I know you can in Iowa because I've done it for years, but I don't know if you can just buy a preference point in Kansas. I think you have exactly. I think you have to just apply for it, and then if you don't draw, you get a preference point, and you'll draw next year.
All right.
So,
all right, Unit 8 only. We're just going to apply.
Yeah, you'll see Cole and I. We'll come to your outfit next fall. I think
that's a deal. I'll put you on a couple giants.
We wouldn't know what to do, man.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome to have you guys in camp. That'd be a lot of fun.
It would be awesome. We'll add it to the calendar, Cole. April.
Yes.
All right, Robin. Robin, add it.
Well, Austin, we appreciate it, man. Always good catching up with you. Good luck with everything. Appreciate everything you do, man. Love seeing your hard work, and glad it's all coming to fruition, man. The plans are working out, man. It's been fun to follow along with the journey.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been fun keeping in touch with you guys for all these years and kind of seeing how both of our companies have grown and expanded, and the cool things that we've all been doing. So it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys always keeping in touch with me. Obviously, I enjoy that. So appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And listeners, as always, we appreciate the hell out of you guys, and we'll talk to you